Yes, it's John Robb here with the latest lockdown interview for Underground Shoes. And today I'm speaking to Vic Galloway, who works the BBC, sometimes does the evening show for Mark Riley. And on every week does your own show on BBC Scotland, don't you?
Hey, John, how's it going?
Everything's cool. Yeah. So how's life during lockdown for you, Vic?
It's strange because you've got this feeling of existential dread and doom at all times because there's a killer global virus out there, a pandemic. So you, on one side, you've got anxiety and stress, and you're being super careful about everything that you do when you have to venture out into the real world, as it were. And then on the other side, there's a sort of weird feeling of calm as well because I've had my foot on the accelerator in a way for 20, 21 years, working away at the BBC, doing radio programs for Radio 1, Six Music, Radio Scotland, also writing books. I've got a couple of books out, DJing, I play in bands. I've just been like doing stuff, one thing after another, and just never, ever really taking time to relax, take stock, sit back and chill. And actually, weirdly enough, we're all being made to do that right now. So in some ways it's quite calming. I'm getting to spend a bit of time tidying the house and doing things that I put off for decades.
Yeah. And you're still doing your show though in Scotland, aren't you?
I am, yeah. At the moment, I suppose in some weird way, I'm a kind of key worker. I go through to Glasgow. I live in Edinburgh. I go through to Glasgow every Monday. The show's at 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock, and I go to the BBC. I get there for about 7, so 1 hour before the show. Normally, in pre-coronavirus, I would have been there a few hours before the show, but I get there 1 hour before the show. I park in the BBC car park. I zap myself in with my card. I hand sanitize. I go through reception. I go up in the lift to the studio. I hand sanitize. I wipe down the studio with hygienic antiseptic wipes. I do the program. I then hand sanitize, wipe down the studio again, go out, hand sanitize at the reception, get in the car and drive home. So I'm basically out of my house for about 4 hours in total. An hour to get there, do the show, So yeah, I'm still doing it. And it's strange because we're not allowed any live guests unless they're through Zoom or phone or Skype or whatever it may be. So, but we are getting lockdown sessions, which is quite interesting. I think it's obviously everyone's doing this in some way, shape or form. But we're collecting a lot of the local bands, a lot of the Scottish bands, Glasgow, Edinburgh, around the country, who we champion on a week-to-week basis. If they're able to record themselves and do a sort of stripped back alternative version of one of their new tracks, then we encourage them to do that and send us the WAV or whatever, and then we play it out. So we've been getting loads of good ones. And in fact, I'm just about to do a podcast with about 10 of these isolation tracks in one bite-sized podcast. So if people are interested, they should go and check it out. The podcast called Scotland Introducing with Vic Galloway.
As somebody's in the middle of the music scene, how do you think the virus situation has affected music? Obviously, we don't know gigs. We may have gigs at some point, maybe in 2 months, 1 year, who knows? But speak to musicians all the time. What are people talking about out there?
Again, it's a sort of, you have to be inventive. Now is the time to think of new ways to get your music and your art out to the world. I mean, obviously, everyone's been savvy with online promotion for a good few years, and people are getting more and more into using Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc., to get their art out to people. But now people are going to really have to think of inventive ways, because if everyone's broadcasting themselves and doing isolation sessions or whatever, you're going to have to start thinking of more and more ingenious ways to connect. But obviously, the fact that bands can't play live, that's an massive blow. I mean, personally, I'm a freelancer, so I do my BBC show, but I also do all this other work, hosting events, DJing, curating festivals and booking shows and, comparing festivals. I would say about half my income comes from that. And that's as a host and a DJ. And that's all vanished. So obviously the band's work has all vanished. The tour managers, the roadies, the booking agents, the riggers, the lighting guys, the sound guys, all of their work's vanished. this is absolutely catastrophic. How those people are going to survive in 6 months, in 8 months, in potentially a year or beyond, I have no idea. So in terms of that, it's awful. In terms of people getting creative, if you're in lockdown and you're in your own house, then and you've got the ability to record your own music at home, then surely this has got to be a time when people, when they feel it, should write and record, and potentially we could see a huge surge of creativity in terms of writing and recording. So if the live side of things feels this catastrophic blow and falls by the wayside and like basically renders a lot of people unemployed, let's hope that the flip side of that, the yin to that yang, is that there'll be loads of creative people sort of making stuff, and that eventually we'll see a huge amount of art being made.
Let's hope it's not all singer-songwriters sat in bedrooms.
Well, you know, there is that, you know, there is that worry. No, I think, for example, some of these lockdown isolation sessions we've been getting, they haven't all just been people with acoustic guitars. Where, you know, and people can do inventive things with acoustic guitars still to this day. A lot of people have been using samplers and you know, and all their technology, whatever, drum machines, you know, sequencers and so on. A lockdown session can be actually a fairly fully hi-fi recording. I mean, my own band, our entire album was made in my spare bedroom through there, and Andy, the beat maker's bedroom over there somewhere in Edinburgh. So, you know, people are doing that. In fact, some of the most cutting edge music ever made is just, you know, a person with software on a laptop. So if you can do that pre-corona, you can do it during corona and post-corona.
So for you, culturally, getting through lockdown, obviously music, as you can see from the background there, pretty key part of your life. Are you finding you're listening to old music to get that warm glow of pre-virus nostalgia, or is it a mixture? Are you listen to very dystopian music to match these times, or do you find there's a trend, or is it very eclectic what you listen to?
It's pretty eclectic for me. To be honest, I constantly listen to music. It's part of my job. It's also my pleasure. It's my passion. I'm one of these guys, John, much like yourself, who turned his nerdy teenage hobby into his life. I'm very lucky, and I count my blessings, I honestly do, to be able to collect this ridiculous amount of music. I mean, I could wave the laptop around, but there's vinyl and CDs and cassettes and, you know, every other hard drives full of music everywhere in this room. So to turn my hobby into my job is a blessing, and I'm very lucky. But so as a result, to answer your question, I'm listening to a lot of new music to play on my program, because that's the main sort of idea of my BBC shows, is to champion new music from Scotland, but also from around the UK and internationally as well. So I'm constantly listening to new stuff. I've been tidying up this ridiculous music collection. So I've been going through and finding albums that I either had never listened to or had maybe listened to once when it came out, you know, 15 years ago. So I've been finding things like Rodeless Schneider, sort of bits of kind of electronica, krautrock, experimental, minimal classical music, you know, things like this. Brian Eno, Carl Hyde album, for example, I had that in the collection. I couldn't really remember it at all. So, you know, listening to things like that, Faust, lots of kind of Tuareg, like blues and all sorts of stuff that I keep finding in the collection that I was like, oh, I can't really remember that album. I must dig it out and, you know, give it another listen. So bits of that, lots of new music that people are constantly sending me on MP3 or WAV or whatever new releases that are coming out. And also my girlfriend is, you know, you call her a goth. She's a goth, okay? She's a goth. She's into post-punk music and so on. And so, for example, last night with a couple of glasses of wine, we went into a kind of gothy wormhole. So we were listening to lots of Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus and The Cure. And then she's actually been asked to make a sort of ultimate goth playlist for a good friend of hers. Said, come on, make me a really good playlist. So we were listening to March Violets and Clan of Zymox and all of this kind of stuff. Not all of which I particularly like, it has to be said. But So, I think it was last week, I actually messaged you and said I'd been listening to we'd had a party between the two of us in our house, listening to The Damned, The Stranglers, Bauhaus, and Bad Brains. For some reason, it was those 4 bands. And these are all bands that I grew up loving as a kid. So there is a little bit of that nostalgia. There's lots of discovering things in my collection that I didn't know I had or that I hadn't listened to. And obviously discovering future music, new music for my program. So it's a bit of everything.
So it sounds like you listen to music all day, but I'm sure there's a few other things you get through lockdown with. So are you doing much reading? Some people do no reading at all. Some people suddenly found this passion for reading.
I know some people who are like completing a book in a day or two, literally from cover to cover. I haven't been reading to be honest, I'm a fairly avid reader anyway. I always have a book or two next to my bed. And I pretty much read every night, for example. But I've actually weirdly haven't been reading as much during the lockdown. I think I've been concentrating on trying to, tidy and organize my flat and do things like that. And by the time I get to bed, once I've had a run or a walk, I'm kind of pretty knackered. But I have been reading. I've got 2 books on the go at the moment. And here for props, for video purposes, Aldous Huxley, Ape and Essence. Full of existential dread, really doomy and dystopian, perfect for these times. And a book that my girlfriend's brother gave me for Christmas, actually, which is called Life 3.0, which is by Max Tegmark, which is all about artificial intelligence. So again, it's pretty scary stuff. One sort of based in actual reality, the artificial intelligence book, and Ape and Essence is, of course, Aldous Huxley. Imagining a dystopian future, which potentially we're living in right now.
Yeah.
So cheery stuff, but it's stuff that gets me thinking and inspires me, and actually, weirdly enough, takes me away. I do like to be transported away from my day-to-day reality. I like escapism. I like fantasy. It's just that my kind of ideas of fantasy and not necessarily Game of Thrones. That's not really my thing. J.G. Ballard is more my thing. So, but each to their own. To be honest, I've not been reading as much as potentially I should be in a way, but I've been keeping myself very busy. Much like yourself, I would imagine, John, I'm never bored. I am never bored. I cannot understand the concept of boredom. I haven't listened to all the records. I've not read all the books. I've not written all the songs. I've not composed all the pieces of music. I've not thought all the thoughts. I've not looked at all the views. So there's just, to be honest, there's not enough time in the day for me to do the stuff that I want to do in normal life. And with lockdown, I'm being afforded the opportunity to do some of the things that perhaps I don't get the opportunity to do normally.
Speaking of Game of Thrones, are you doing much TV, box sets or films or anything?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, again, I don't watch TV at all during the day. I'm always busy doing things, but at night I tend to watch stuff. I like a good movie. I saw a film on All 4, the catch-up system from Channel 4 called the Niall Hilton Incident. I think, is it called the Niall Hilton Incident? It was a film made in Cairo, which I absolutely loved. But the things I've really been digging into are kind of documentaries. I watched the Sinatra 4-part documentary on the iPlayer and absolutely loved that. I thought I knew quite a lot about Old Blue Eyes, but if I found out that I didn't actually. I didn't know you'd been married to Mia Farrow, for example, and Ava Gardner and all sorts of things like this. And I thought it was fairly even-handed. It obviously said that he was a total legend and that he was one of the greatest pop singers of all time. But it also painted out some of the darker, chapters in his life. So I've been enjoying that Sinatra documentary. Probably like every other person who's got an internet connection and Netflix, I watched The Tiger King. I'm probably rocking a bit of leopard print at the moment. Actually, I should show you that. Look at that. So I watched The Tiger King documentary with my girlfriend. We got completely immersed in that. And we watched Louis Theroux's sort of interview with him as well. Which I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of, that he'd actually interviewed that guy. So that was fascinating. And I also watched, there was a what was it, 5-part OJ Simpson documentary called OJ Made in America. Now, I'm not sure if that's still up on the iPlayer. Again, is there anything more that you need to know about OJ Simpson? This was a 5-part documentary. Each part is an hour and a half long. So it's 7.5 hours of documentary. Jesus, it like you go right into it and you find out all about his background, and it deals with social commentary and looks at the kind of socio-economic problems that were going on in the USA and in black culture and all sorts of things. It's really, really fascinating. If you haven't seen that, I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, and digging into the Storyville series on the iPlayer as well. I mean, we go from Netflix to All4 to iPlayer, occasionally watch something live as well on TV. I like movies, but again, I'm quite picky, probably in the same way that I am with music as well. I don't want a cheeseball, Hollywood, seen it all, done it all before kind of film. You know, if I know he's the goodie, he's the baddie, she's the love interest, we've got to sit through this for two hours to find out a whole string of cliches, I'm not interested. I'm always looking for something that's going to, you know, make me think and inspire me. So yeah, lots of documentaries and lots of movies, really.
Finally, it's good to see, even though the viewers can't see, unless you lift your leg up, you've got the Underground Creepers on.
I certainly do. Hey! Classics.
Are you wearing them when you go down to the shops, when you're queuing up at the shops?
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, like wearing Creepers. I have many pairs of Creepers. I couldn't tell you exactly how many. Probably not as many as you, John, but I must have about 6, 7, 8 pairs of Creepers. I've actually got blue suede shoes somewhere, which I'm pleased about. I managed to track some down. I've got leather ones. I've got some ankle high white Creeper boots, which I actually don't have the guts to wear. Maybe I'll pass them on to you. I've got a feeling you might be a slightly bigger size. But anyway, I've got plenty of Creepers. But I love these underground ones that I've got are they're kind of the classic one thickness rather than the double thickness sole. They're the pointed style. I can't remember the exact name. And they're in suede. Basically, when I was a nipper and I first started wearing Creepers, when I could first get the pocket money together to buy them when I was a teenager, I wanted the ones which the Pistols and the Clash were wearing, and so I tracked down, and these are kind of those classic styles. So yeah, I love Creepers. I love kind of shoes and fashion and so on, up to a point. You know, I'm kind of like, I'm not as dapper and stylish as your good self, but I do like a 3-piece tweed suit. I like a good brogue boot. I'm trying to invent my own style in some ways, which is, I suppose, tweed punk. So I quite like, I blame it on the Beastie Boys, but I like golfing gear. I like sort of Fair Isle patterned sweaters, but with Creepers, you know, skull rings and sort of chest tattoos and all this sort of stuff, but with a nice bit of tweed to accompany it. So it's that kind of combination of, I think it's the inspiration from Westwood and McLaren and Leiden, I think, back in the day as well, of just, you know, being irreverent with legendary fabrics and so on and so on. But then I like a hoodie and a t-shirt as well. So yeah, but Creepers have always been in my life. Well, what am I now? I'm 47. So I've probably been wearing Creepers since I was about 13 years old. So do the maths, whatever that is, 34, 35 years.
Of course, you've got one of the best tweed suit shops I've ever been in. It's in Edinburgh, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some great tweed shops in Edinburgh. There's one on Victoria Street called Walker Slater, where I've got a load of suits. I think they've got a shop in London now as well, and maybe one in Glasgow. They've probably got a few. They do either bespoke tweed or you can get them off the rail. And actually, I've interviewed John Lydon a couple of times. And the second once was kind of down the line, was like a radio interview, and I wasn't in the same room as him. But the second time I met him face to face, and it was vaguely terrifying, as you might imagine. Apart from the fact that he's a total hero of mine, he's obviously notoriously nasty to people who interview him, or he can be. And I broke the ice with him by talking about tweed. That was the way that I sort of got him on my side. We walked through this this kind of complex is building to where we were recording an interview. And during the walk, which took about 5-10 minutes, I just talked to him about tweed, and I spoke to him about Walker Slayer, for example. But nowadays, I tend to go to another shop called Stuart Christie's, and I think they're the oldest tweed maker in Edinburgh. And friends of mine that used to work at Walker Slater took over Stuart Christie, and it's proper sort of hunting, shooting, fishing, Tory type, clientele. But they're obviously young and dynamic, and they want to bring in sort of younger, more sort of dynamic people themselves who are perhaps a little bit more alternative. They've had Ewan McGregor getting fitted. The cast of Trainspotting, when they did Trainspotting 2, all went and got bespoke tweed suits from there. And they've made me some amazing tweed jackets and so on, but they also made me these incredible tartan bondage trousers. Sadly, my uncle died a few years ago, and I was helping clear out his house, and I found a length of tartan, and I got them made into bespoke bondage trousers, and they look great, and they're absolutely beautifully made. And it was Stuart Christie's that did that. So we're spoiled. I mean, those aren't the only two tweed shops in Edinburgh, and obviously there's Harris Tweed and the Hebrides and so on. I mean, it's like, it's if you want tweed, you come to Scotland or possibly Ireland for the good stuff.
Excellent.